As schools are preparing for the start of another year, many districts say they are not ready to bring students back into the buildings because of the spread of COVID in their communities. But President Trump is dialing up the pressure on them to do so. He tried to make the case for that again today at the White House. Kellyanne Conway is counselor to President Trump, and she joins us now. Kellyanne Conway, welcome back to the NewsHour. As we were saying, the president is trying to get the schools to open up physically, but this comes at the very same time we are learning that there's been a 90% increase in the number of children diagnosed or with this infection, something like 100,000 children diagnosed at the end of July. Now we have the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Association of Children's Hospitals saying, please hold off on in-person schools. How does that square with what the president is saying?
Judy, our message today in our discussion with parents, teachers, scientists and doctors and students themselves was very clear. Let's reopen safely. The word safely is critically important here because, as you point out, roughly 50% or so of the nation's students are not returning to a physical structure on day one of the regular school year this fall. So what does that mean? It means that those that are still have low infection rates, knowing that children are still at relatively low risk from contracting, that 99.95% of the COVID fatalities are adults. And of course, the average age is 78. But having said that, people are very concerned, and we wanted to make sure that we amplified and acknowledged those concerns and came up with 8 different things the president is announcing tonight that we think will help schools to safely reopen. Among other things, the president is reminding that through the CARES Act, we've allocated $13 billion in resources to help these schools safely reopen. Some may want to invest in thermometer checks, some may want to do testing, others may want a contingency plan for older educators who feel that they're at higher risk.
And
so,
that,
yes.
if I could just step in, I understand you're giving specific recommendations. That may work for some districts where the prevalence is very low, but you do have rising cases. More than half the states right now are seeing a resurgence of COVID. The school district in Georgia that just this past week opened up early, one district, 900 students and staff are now quarantined because of what they've done. So there are caution flags all around.
Yes. And I'm raising them actually in this interview and in the discussion we had today because that is indubitably true that some people are very concerned. That's why I'm not saying open the schools now, I'm saying open them safely. And each district will have to decide what that means. But this is a good time to prepare for that, Judy. In other words, there are protocols in place, the social distancing, the mask wearing, the hygiene, making sure that young children understand what we've all learned as adults now and how critically important that is. Also recommending no cafeteria eating, perhaps eating at your desk, limiting indoor activities like assemblies, for example. And I've heard epidemiologists and doctors recommend more you can do outside than inside for any of us, let alone including these students, the better. So each school will need to make those decisions. I would point out the Kaiser Family Foundation Health Tracker survey revealed just in the last 2 weeks that 67% of parents say they are worried about their children falling behind socially and 65% falling behind academically. And in that same survey, 51% of the parents said they're worried about themselves not being able to earn enough money if the kids aren't back in school. So we're not saying do it today, tomorrow, or next week. We're saying let's do it safely and let's not lock down kids indefinitely. Judy, I've never met a parent.
We should also say, if I could just step in, there was another survey done by the Schar School, Ipsos, the Washington Post, showing that more than 80% of parents said that they think schools should be at least partially online. Only 16% are favoring fully in-person education. So
and you are seeing many districts have this hybrid or starting virtual with a promise to reassess, say, in October, November, and in some cases longer. We also heard stories today from folks who are already back in school. Lubbock, Texas, and some other places, they came to say we're already back in school. We also heard from a mother and father who have a Down syndrome, a special needs child in Columbia, South Carolina. They feel like this is the worst possible outcome for that child because he requires so many of his services inside, in other words, with those specialists. So that shows you there's no one-size-fits-all mandate, and we as a federal government don't want to do that. We do want to remind
But
the states,
other-
though, Judy, that the $13 billion that's available, roughly 4% of that has even been tapped into. So folks out there in the states, you have resources ready for you to help you to plan to reopen those schools when you feel it is best to do so.
I think our question is that at a time when we're getting new information about children at risk and even about how children can be strong spreaders of COVID, that this is a very mixed message that the American people are getting from the White House about this. But Kellyanne Conway, let me ask you just quickly about the big news on the Democratic presidential ticket. Joe Biden has introduced his running mate, Senator Kamala Harris. The president's first reaction in his comments at the White House yesterday were to call her nasty and horrible. He's called other women politicians, Hillary Clinton, Nancy Pelosi, nasty. Is this the tone that is going to mainly come from the president toward her and toward this ticket?
Well, I've said, Judy, that I think we can take a moment, pause, and say good for history. We have a young and fragile democracy, and for a woman of color to be on a major party ticket is
But
something
that's
we
not
should all
what the
celebrate.
president said.
Well, I'm standing in front of the White House saying it to you, and then I think we can also quickly say that even those who pretend they are forward-looking would bring us backward. Your tax cuts gone, trade deals gone, energy dominance, that we're the net exporters of natural gas and oil, that would be gone. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are for abortion in the 9th month. That is the most extreme position you can have. And the list goes on and on. Is she for defunding the police? Because she made joyful noises about it when Los Angeles did that recently. She said she was the top cop, but she was also soft on crime.
Joe Biden is not for defunding the police.
Well, Joe Biden really should make clear, well, the ticket will be the ticket. And here's the issue I see. I think it's their policy positions. I think Medicare for all, government-run health care, and talking about Green New Deals, which would cost trillions of dollars, and ban air travel and cows and gas. I mean, this is outside of the mainstream of America.
There are a lot of policy positions that you're throwing out there. And as you know, Joe Biden is not for Medicare for all, and neither is Senator Harris. But I want to ask you about something else that the president, he tweeted this morning about suburban housewives wanting safety and threatening that Cory Booker, who happens to be the only African-American senator, male senator today, would invade their neighborhood with low-income housing. I'm just curious, why would the president mention Senator Booker on this just right after Joe Biden chooses a black woman, a woman of Asian descent, to be his running mate? I mean, people are saying this is a racial dog whistle.
No, that's not fair. I've not discussed that tweet or that issue at all with the president, but I would gently correct that Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina is an African-American male senator currently serving the United States Senate. Cory Booker is not the only one, and Senator Scott, of course, has a wonderful bill.
I meant to say the only African-American Democratic senator.
Okay. Having said that, I believe everybody wants public safety, and I would look at the Gallup poll from last week, Judy, that says 86% of Americans say that they want the same or more police presence in their communities. That included 83% of Hispanic Americans and 81% of African Americans. So this defunding the police, or what we see in our great cities across this country where people are just going out every single night and destroying property, it really belies the memory of those for whom the peaceful protesters actually began. This is not peaceful protesting. This is vandalism and violence.
And let me just finally bring this back to the central message that we just heard a few minutes ago from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. I mean, she said today the president failed to take this virus seriously from the start. And said that, in other words, holding this president responsible, and that is what this campaign is going to be about. The fact that the United States is doing so much worse than most of the rest of the world, and the fact that the number of cases in this country far higher than the proportion of the U.S. population to the rest of the world.
Well, Judy, here's what I would say to Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. If they've got a better way to tackle this pandemic, what are they waiting for? Where have they been for 5 months? We've been here every single day. I sit in the coronavirus task force meetings right behind Drs. Birx and Fauci. That is my regular seat. I've been here Saturdays and Sundays. The president and vice president worked around the clock, and we are trying to get this right for the American people. This president has signed trillions of dollars in relief, taking that bold step to ban travel from certain areas that were highly infected early, saved additional lives. Everybody who needed a ventilator got a ventilator. We are developing vaccines and therapeutics at a record pace. NIH Director Francis Collins, a doctor who has been there for decades, he said he has never seen something come together so quickly and so well. And we are working very hard to do that. We also have dealt with our G7 leaders because it's a global pandemic, that we have surge supplies, PPE, we've cleaning the nursing homes through the National Guard. I mean, it goes on and on. Meanwhile, Congress wasn't even here. Joe Biden's been in Wilmington. I told the president, you should go visit Wilmington. We want to see what all the fuss is.
Well, I would just say Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer said today that the White House, they met with Treasury Secretary Mnuchin today, who said the White House was not budging on its position, whereas they have given $1 trillion from the $3 trillion that they presented.
Secretary Mnuchin told me just a half an hour ago in the Oval Office that that was inaccurate, what Speaker Pelosi had tweeted out. But look, we want to get to the negotiation. We want to get to the negotiation table. Judy, it's the Democrats who walked away, compelling the president to take executive action on protecting you from evictions, not having you pay your student loan debt, giving you more unemployment benefit through that payroll tax suspension. And we are trying to do that because in the absence of congressional action and leadership, the president has no choice. We want to get back to the table and get the funding for the schools, get the funding for small businesses and workers who need that relief. But the president also today in his press briefing, he reviewed some of the great economic data that is happening, more jobs created in the last 3 months than I think in a very long time. And we are coming out of this recovery.
We're watching.
We'd love for Kamala Harris and Joe Biden to help the country now. Are they waiting until November 4th to announce a big plan? Let's help the country now if they've got some great idea cooking in Wilmington.
We're going to see a debate, an active debate between now and November 3rd. Kellyanne Conway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Judy.